In this video, I'll share a framework that'll help you become a more efficient hunter. It's the love child of old school hunting and lean manufacturing. I based it on ideas from a diverse range of folks, including Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, and John Boyd. The ideas were never intended for hunting, but I'm confident they'll give you a new and improved view on how to do more with less when you plan and in the field. Welcome to the Red Kettle channel. Here you'll get a view under the bonnet. You can see what products we're working on, and I'll share ideas and tools for efficient hunting. Let's get to it. Today, it's all about the efficient hunting framework. In part 1 of this series, I talked about the morning I shot my first roebuck and how I felt I was on the top of the world. I also shared my old approach to improving, which meant spending my time reading everything I could about hunting and buying the best gear I could afford. All that hard work made me certain I was doing it all right. But when I started Red Kettle, I was reflecting on hunting to build the best possible gear, and I realized my approach to hunting had been all wrong. I spent time on things that weren't essential. I'd not had a system with basic checks and reminders, and I'd not had a structured way to reflect and improve. It was a wake-up call, and it set me off on a journey to become a more efficient hunter in the field, but also in planning, preparing, and optimizing. I don't know about you, but efficiency is important to me because I want to get the most out of my hunting time and budget. And I believe hunting is a force of good in nature if I do my part. Here's the challenge, and maybe you recognize it. There's so many things you can study, so much great gear you can buy, but as Wilfredo Pareto taught us, most often the majority of our value comes from a minority of activities. It's an 80-20 principle. Just think about most hunting exams. There's a ton of relevant and important information, things to learn, but very few of them will actually help you find and kill an animal. It can be difficult to navigate that kind of information overload, even if you're a seasoned hunter. Fortunately, I've spent a great deal of my professional career optimizing processes, finding patterns, and identifying the few inputs that create the most output. And one of the tools I keep coming back to is Lean Six Sigma, which I learned at General Electric. I realized I could apply these ideas to optimize my approach to hunting. I could combine my 25 plus years of experience as a hunter, successes and failures, with lean tools to become more efficient. And I hope you can use all these ideas to leapfrog and avoid some of the wasted time, wasted money and mistakes that I made in the past. There was one challenge though. Lean Six Sigma was created for manufacturing, so I had to translate the concepts to hunting. Long story short, I zoomed in on the lean principles to figure out which ones were relevant, and I settled on 4 of them. After that, I considered how to translate them so they became actionable and relevant for hunting. Before we dive into the details, let's look at the complete toolbox. Here it is. Have a look at the different pieces. In the center, there's 3 tools in a sort of hierarchy. The hunting scenario and the process represent the foundation. And I based this layer on the core lean tools. In the second layer, I placed the first principles of hunting. Warren Buffett and Elon Musk helped me with them, indirectly. And at the very top is the window of opportunity. It's my hunting North Star. I found it one day in the woods with help from an Olympic gold medalist rifle shooter. They're your core tools, reference points, and basic vocabulary for efficient hunting. And you can apply them via 3 loops. There's a micro loop, which is the OODA Loop, which you can use in the field together with the process. I borrowed that from the fighter pilot John Boyd, and you need to look under the bonnet of that model to really understand the true value. The EPiPHany loop is the overall hunting cycle that takes you from start of a season to end of a season, or start to end of a hunting trip. And it's a middle loop in the model. I developed it based on input from a tough rifle shooter, a Vietnam era sniper, and the way they address a common pitfall among hunters. And finally, there's mastery. Bruce Lee has a thing to say about that, and it's related the first principles of hunting. I want to stress that this is not a rigid framework, one that you have to apply in a very specific manner. It's more like a toolbox. Summary illustration represents one way of seeing it. You'll combine the components in slightly different ways when you implement them. Or you might just pick one idea to help you make a decision or get a new perspective on a hunting concept you're pondering. And the way I developed them was through yet another structure the lean principles. I'd like to take you on that journey so you can understand how the tools relate to lean thinking and the path to help you become a more efficient hunter. Just to be clear, I cover a lot of ground in this video, but I won't go into the actionable detail. I'll reserve that for separate videos on efficient hunting. Oh, and by the way, this framework will change over time. Things always change, and they should do. You'll know why at the end of the video. Now let's get to the first principle. In lean, the first thing we do is define customer value. But for hunting, it's about your needs. And those needs are specific to each hunting situation. They depend on the given scenario you're preparing for. When you define the hunting scenario, you need to consider at least 5 overall components. And you need to determine how they impact your choice of gear, what they mean in terms of skills you need to acquire or refine. This might seem like basic or obvious stuff, but it's absolutely critical. You've got to be crystal clear on these requirements because all your choices will lead back to them. Why is one of the most important questions you can ask. As a hunter and in life, you've got to define your hunting scenario well enough that you're able to answer why to all your questions about skills, knowledge and gear, about the 5 T's that I'll introduce in a moment. In lean, the main reference point for efficiency work is value stream mapping. It's how we capture an existing process to find waste and create flow, and it's the way we describe our new and improved process. For hunting, I define a process and I use a simple matrix to map it out. That way I capture the implications of all the requirements I noted in the scenario. Not true approaches to hunting are exactly the same. So I've come up with 6 modules of phases. They're based on the key objectives that you've got to reach in order to kill an animal. For hunting, these are generally speaking the things you've got to do. You need to move to get into your hunting ground, and you also often have to cover ground on the trip to get to a specific location. You've got to find the animal you're hunting and get within range. When you're in range, you've got to prepare for the shot and make sure the shot is clear and safe. You'll shoot the animal, and then you have to go through some kind of follow-up to secure the animal, inspect it, make sure it's suitable for consumption, and that it's ready for transport. I summarize these activities this way. As I said, they're modules. Depending on your type of hunting, you can mix the order and approach for the 4 first phases in particular. To create efficiency, you need more detail than those phases, because efficiency is about the gear used and how you use it. I use what I call the 5 T's as a reminder for what to document and what to look at. It's kind of a hierarchy, which I find helpful to take me from the big picture to specific detail. Elon Musk has a point of view on that kind of approach, which I'll get back to when we talk about first principles of hunting. With the 5 T's, you get a matrix to map the process. Tactics are broadly speaking how you mix up the phases and some of the different approaches you can take to complete each phase. Tasks are the actual things you've got to do to complete a phase, based on the tactics you used, of course. And tools is the gear you bring to complete your tasks. And techniques are how you use each tool. The final T, transitions, is how you pull it all together and achieve complete flow. Use that matrix together with the hunting scenario and you'll have a good starting point for more efficiency work. There's a lot more to it, and I'll do deep dives on both the scenario and the process in other videos. I mentioned the 80-20 principle earlier. It's the idea that a few activities generate the bulk of value. And you can say that the second principle, reduce waste, is about finding those activities and removing everything else. In lean, there are 2 overall types of waste. The first one covers the things that are necessary but don't add value. They increase the overall time to perform a task. Safety and regulation are examples of type 1 waste, so it's important we don't get carried away and remove them. Type 2 waste are the things that are unnecessary and don't add value. It's all those tactics, tasks, tools and techniques we want to eliminate. In lean, we refer to several types of waste. For hunting, you can consider these 3. They include the times we perform unnecessary actions, when we make mistakes and spend money on gear that doesn't really add value. They mainly apply to the first part of the 5 T's. So you've got to ask yourself, is everything on the list relevant to the scenario you defined? The next principle is flow. It's a lean term, is to arrange work in a tight sequence, and it's the heart of efficiency. For hunting, I use the last 2 T's, techniques and transitions, to help me improve flow. Right answers depend on the context, so I used 3 questions to help me settle on the right techniques and transitions before I even look at optimizing them. Is something appropriate for a given scenario? Does it suit my preferences, my skills and knowledge? Am I comfortable and capable with that particular technique or transition? I suppose there's a bit of an overlap with waste here, which is not a big deal. What's important is that you pick the technique or transition that suit you and the scenario best, and then work to refine it. There's one model that helped me define flow. It's the 4 stages of competence. It's based on the idea that you need to move from unconscious incompetence, where you don't know what you don't know, to unconscious competence, which means that each technique and each transition is second nature. Let's look at what we have so far. Here's the foundation for your efficiency work. The next step is to consider how you pursue perfection, how you continue to apply those tools to become a more efficient hunter. The key word for perfection is iteration. You do something, you learn and you improve. I find it helpful to consider 3 levels or 3 loops to guide my continuous improvement. Let's start in the middle. To me, the middle level is the hunting cycle. It's how you build up to each new season or to a new hunting trip. I learned 3 important lessons about the middle level when I read Secrets of Mental Marksmanship. I'll link to that book in the description below. And here's what I learned. Experimentation is critical for improving. Complexity must be increased gradually when practicing something new, and you must not mix up the training, planning and application phases. So how do we apply those ideas and terms to hunting? The application phase is when we're in the field hunting. It's what we capture with the hunting process matrix. Before we go on a trip, we need an element of planning, both for scouting in the field and planning logistics from home. We also need to make space for practice, to develop that unconscious competence. And before we can get to that, we need a phase for experimentation. That's where we pick our gear, define the techniques and transitions we'll practice. And here's an important lesson, one that I've learned the hard way. The planning phase is not the time for new gear or skills development. At that stage, everything has to be locked in. Otherwise, you end up going on a trip where you don't perform at the appropriate level of competence. No last minute changes, stick with what you know. The idea that you should have a separate experimentation phase was a bit of a eureka moment to me. So I remember this loop as EPiPHany. The hunting phase in the EPiPHany loop is a micro level. And there are a couple of things going on here. A couple of ideas that you can use to become more efficient. And here's the first one. This level is where you apply the hunting process and the principles which I'll get to in a moment. If you're as gung-ho about hunting as me, it's natural to suffer from overtrying. And overtrying means focusing on the deer, the outcome, instead of the things that will get you there. It stops you from executing properly, and for that very reason, overtrying often leads to failure. When it's on your radar, it's easy to fix. You can fix it in several ways, starting with the process, focus on each step. And the hunting principles that I'll talk about in a moment are also helpful. I have one final step that I use as a reminder when I'm out hunting to help me avoid overtrying and to help me focus on execution. I refer to it as the window of opportunity, and it's my hunting North Star. It's the idea that hunting revolves around that moment when you get or make an opportunity to shoot. You work patiently to create it, and you act swiftly with determination to use it. The window of opportunity. And now to the second tool you can use. When hunting, you need to be able to react to the situation as it unfolds around you. And the concept that helps me with that is the OODA Loop. It was developed by John Boyd, a fighter pilot, but not just any pilot. He had a reputation for winning any dogfight in less than 40 seconds. And he was credited as having serious influence on the plan that won the first Iraq War. The loop is a decision-making model. It's deceivingly simple, and the real value is not the 4 steps to help you think and act. The true value is twofold. First, it's to understand your goal as a hunter is to get inside the animal's loop, which means predicting behavior so you can put yourself in the most optimal position to shoot. And secondly, the loop is a reminder that everything hinges around your ability to orient, your capacity to make sense of things when you're out hunting. So the OODA Loop is not just relevant when you're out hunting in the field, but also how you continue to develop skills and knowledge. I'll get back to that point in a moment when I've introduced the next level. In essence, it's about reflecting on the entire EPiPHany loop. in order to improve and achieve mastery. And that's why I refer to that loop as the mastery loop. Bruce Lee explains the process well. Think about those phases and how they apply to becoming a more efficient hunter. In reality, it's not just 3 steps. I think you run them in loops as well. Once you reach one peak, you're able to see the next mountain in front of you. These 3 steps are connected with the levels of competence, and the obvious and important thing to do is to improve the process. Reduce waste, create flow. In a way, you can say the work on waste and flow relates to learn the art in the Bruce Lee quote. There's another concept that leans a little more towards the understand the art part of that quote. One that helps me crystallize mastery for hunting. When researching decision making, I learned how Warren Buffett and his investment partner, Charlie Munger, use mental models. And one of those models is first principles thinking. I mentioned Elon Musk when introducing the process, and he's got something to say about first principles thinking. First principles are the core mechanics, the underlying, never-changing truths. To me, a key part of mastery is to formulate a set of hunting principles, first principles for hunting, and I'll present those principles in a future video in this series. I mentioned orient in the OODA Loop earlier. It's directly connected with the mastery in the sense that mastery is about reflection and afterthought in order to better yourself as a hunter. And one of the big questions you should ask yourself to improve is, what gets in your way of your capacity to orient? Consider what you map for the process. What item is in second nature? Fix it so it doesn't reduce your capacity to think and act in the field. Address it so you can get inside the animal's loop. That was a lot of information. Let's recap. Here's the full model. Efficient hunting is guided by 4 lean principles. When you've defined what's important to a situation, map the process and work to remove waste and create flow. Over time, you continue this process because as you learn, you can identify more waste and create more flow. The core tools you use are the scenario and the hunting process, a set of first principles, and the window of opportunity. And you apply and refine them through 3 levels. The micro level with the OODA Loop, the middle level with the EPiPHany loop, and the macro level for your journey towards mastery. I wish I'd had this framework when I first started out hunting. I would have been able to cut through the noise when it came to information, skills and gear. I would have had a way to help me spend my hunting time and money better. And I would have had a clear path for continuous improvement. I would have known that the morning when I got the roebuck would have been the starting shot, that I wasn't on top of the world, just on top of the first mountain. Like I said at the start, things change because your vantage point changes. With each improvement, you have basis for new improvements. I hope you can use this framework to become a more efficient hunter, either as inspiration to improve your own system, or as a toolbox you use actively. I'll put a link to the full blog post in the description below if you want more detail. And I'll also link to some of the folks and books I've mentioned. I'll keep posting videos on all the details of this toolbox. Let us know if you've got any questions or ideas to share. Please like if you did, subscribe, and switch on notifications if you'd like to hear more from us. Thanks for watching.